Quality, comfort, and grip at an affordable price. Whether it's our standard, pro, or elite socks, there's an option for everyone. Try a pair for yourself now at puregripsocks.com.
Ignoring the fact that I somehow completely missed the month of September, welcome back to the monthly SR4U Q&A series, your football boot related questions and my answers to them. Where if you have a question that you'd like me to answer in next month's Q&A video, be sure to leave it down in the comment section. And really quickly before we get started, drop a like if you enjoy the series and want to see it continue happening. And if you're not subscribed to the channel already and appreciate the unsugar-coated, unsponsored, brutally honest opinions on this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2025. Do you think the Mizuno Wave Ignitis should be making a comeback? Their Morelia and Alpha lines proved to be a success with pros wearing them in leagues around the world, and they should provide some competition to Nike's Phantom 6 and the Adidas Predator. Short answer, yes. Long answer, I always thought that the Mizuno Wave Ignitis was one of the most underappreciated lines of football boots that Mizuno ever created. And I think it did fall victim to maybe straying too far away from the original recipe, especially when it went synthetic. And it also fell victim, like a lot of football boots, to what Nike introduced in 2014 with Superfly 4 and Magista Obra, where we can't forget there were so many great football boots available at that time, but because those were so different and so hyped up, nobody wanted anything else, which caused a lot of brands to scramble and just do something different. Hence why the Wave Ignitis probably went away in the first place. Where if we look at the original Wave Ignitis 1, it's everything that I love about modern high-tech football boots. Every single idea kind of thrown into one product that basically combines everything. You have a combination of kangaroo leather and synthetic, you have large rubber striking elements, you have a knuckleball panel here on the inside of the foot, you have very unique shaping and overall a super comfortable fit, you have Mizuno Wave Tech under the heel, you have a carbon element to the sole plate, you have a split sole construction, you have a super unique stud pattern. Everything about this football boot is just incredibly interesting, and with the growth of social media and I think the knowledge that people have of the Mizuno brand now versus when these were a current model, Mizuno, both from a public perception perspective as well as an availability perspective, is just on way more people's radar, and especially given the popularity of nostalgic concepts like the Predator 25 Elite that is doing so well right now, I don't see why Mizuno's reincarnated interpretation of a modern day power / control boot couldn't do super well. Where don't get me wrong, I don't think they should discontinue or change anything that they're currently doing. Classic Morelia is fantastic. Morelia Neo is probably going to be a staple for the foreseeable future. It's a great football boot, and I really love what they're doing with the Alpha series, but if Mizuno really wanted to expand into having a fourth line, something along the lines of a Wave Ignitis would be incredibly exciting, at least for me. Do you think kangaroo leather boots will eventually be discontinued? We see Nike already did this for the Tiempo, and rumors are indicating that even Mizuno is considering removing kangaroo leather from their boots. This is a topic and a question that I think people have been asking about for the last 5 to 10 years or so, and I've kind of tiptoed around it for quite some time, and I'm honestly going to continue to do so because I know it's a very touchy subject for a lot of people. So remaining as a complete neutral, where yes, admittedly, I do really like a lot of kangaroo leather football boots. Mizuno's made in Japan product line, predominantly made from kangaroo leather, some of the finest football boots that money can buy, and I personally have not heard the rumor about Mizuno getting away from using K leather. Hopefully that's not the case, but I definitely understand why a lot of people are very much against it. At the same time, and like I've talked about before on this channel, the type of leather matters a lot less than the actual quality of the final product. In other words, not all kangaroo leather is equal, and some kangaroo leather can be worse than, say, a calf or cow leather material, which is typically viewed as inferior. A great example of this would be a made in Japan kangaroo leather football boot versus whatever Puma is doing with the King Platinum 21. That's some of the worst kangaroo leather I've ever felt on a football boot, period. Where realistically, the only reason why we associate kangaroo leather as being the best leather is through years and years and years of marketing from big companies. Back when leather football boots were what everybody wanted, kangaroo leather was always the top level. Was that because it was genuinely the best leather for a pair of football boots, or because it sounded cool and made it different from normal cow leather? I always found it kind of funny that what was for a very long time considered the gold standard in football boots was from a German company, and a football boot that was actually made in Germany out of materials that I suppose would have had to be imported from Australia. Where again, I guess kangaroo leather has been presented to us as being the softest, most durable, best feel, most comfortable, whatever buzzwords you want to use. But whether or not that is actually true, we don't really know, because there are plenty of examples of leather football boots not made from kangaroo leather that also feel really good. But I guess to get back on topic and actually answer the question, I think the only way that it goes away entirely is if public perception gets negative enough to where if you are a company producing kangaroo leather football boots or kangaroo leather products and you are seeing a decline in sales because of those products that you're producing, that I would assume would force you to stop doing it. Where yes, kangaroo leather products are banned in certain places, but at the end of the day, all of these big companies are motivated by sales. And if sales start to decline because of the products that they're making, they will change the products that they're making. If sales stay the same or continue to grow, then I don't see why they would change a thing. We're not to argue for or against kangaroo leather, but in the case of Mizuno, being that that's the main example, and they do make a lot of kangaroo leather football boots, I would say they're probably doing better than they ever have before because they're one of the only ones still making K leather football boots, where Nike, on the flip side, changing the Tiempo Legend 10 from kangaroo leather to synthetic for the very first time ever. If I am to believe what I am told from a bunch of different retailers, Tiempo Legend 10 is the worst selling Tiempo in a very long time. Unless it's completely outlawed globally, I don't see it going away. And on the flip side, I don't necessarily see it making a huge comeback, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if certain brands started using it again. I know you did a reel where you spoke about the best Mercurial of all time, but can you answer which of these three for you and performance-wise nowadays is the best? To answer this question just off the top of my head, there are 5 specific Mercurial models that come to mind as being the best in terms of performance by today's standards, where I think it'd be absolutely silly to not consider the latest Mercurials to not be one of the best ever, and they're certainly one of the more unique options with that grip knit upper, which you may love, you may hate, but objectively, I think the current Mercs, whether it's Superfly or Vapor, fantastic football boots. If you're not a grip knit fan, however, and also don't care for the air zoom tech in the sole plate, Vapor 13 and Superfly 7 are also fantastic speed boots that I think many would argue, and you wouldn't be wrong, that that is the greatest performing Mercurial model of all time, easily as good as what we have now. And then maybe a little bit further away, especially from a comfort perspective, I would argue, but still really good performers if you like the way that these football boots feel. Mercurial Vapor 11, so ridiculously lightweight, fantastic football boot. Mercurial Vapor 10, I also really like, but maybe that's just a personal favorite. And then Vapor 8 and 9, I'm gonna lump them together because they're effectively the same thing. Also really good football boots if you like that Tasian synthetic upper and a more traditional OG Mercurial Vapor construction. I bet there's also a lot of people that would probably say OG Superfly 4 from 2014 just because it was such an impactful product and so many people loved it. But if you compared the fit and feel of those to the Mercurials that are currently on offer, I think you might be a little bit surprised at how lacking the Superfly 4 is in terms of overall comfort. that whole mid-cut Flyknit concept from Nike has actually come a long way in the last 11 years. But yeah, any one of those 5 Mercs from a wearability and performance perspective, totally viable as options today. It's often spoken about how certain FG stud patterns can be worn on artificial grass, while others, like the FG stud pattern on the Vapor 16, should not be worn on AG ever because they're too aggressive. Does this also mean that more aggressive FG stud patterns would also put you at a higher injury risk on natural grass compared to more forgiving or safer FG stud patterns? This is a really interesting question and a topic that I could probably discuss for an hour straight, but to keep it as simple and short as possible, I do think that when you have more aggressive traction, regardless of the playing surface, meaning that when your foot is planted, it is more stuck in the ground than another stud pattern, that does potentially put you at a higher risk of injury simply based on the logic that when you're pushing off and your foot is more stuck in the ground, that's allowing you to apply more force to your ankles, to your knees, and to your hips. Where maybe I'm thinking about this too much from a weightlifting perspective, but if I'm applying more force to my joints versus less force, I just feel like I am more likely to hurt myself during those times when I'm applying more force. That's of course not to suggest that you couldn't suffer the same injury or the same amount of injuries with a less aggressive stud pattern that allows your foot to slip a little bit and potentially protect your joints, but who's also to say that you slipping couldn't also cause an injury? Where I think the answer to this question is going to vary a lot from one person to the next, where for the vast majority, I don't really think this is a concern. If you're wearing your FG boots on firm natural grass like they were intended, your risk of injury is whatever the risk of injury is of just playing a sport in general. But if you are somebody that, let's just say, rolls your ankle regularly, and every time that you've rolled your ankle is because your foot gets stuck in the ground and you can't stop your body from letting your ankle roll over, then it's possible that having something that digs into the ground more aggressively would increase your risk of injury versus something less aggressive with rounded, slightly shorter studs. It's one of those things you kind of have to judge for yourself, but in general, I would say no. I don't think that a more aggressive stud pattern on the surface it was intended for is inherently dangerous. Or at least I don't think it makes enough of a difference where that should be your concern. Do you think the Adidas Copa Gloro 2 competes with higher end leather boots? This is a pretty common question that I get, especially as it relates to a more budget-friendly option. People want to know if they can legitimately compete with the more expensive alternatives, and the simple answer is yes, they can. It might not fit the same or feel quite as streamlined as something a little bit higher end, because I think that's really the big difference that I notice more than anything when going from a lower end product to a higher end one, the refinement in the shape itself. But with a leather boot, after you break them in, they tend to mold to your feet anyway. So the Copa Gloro 2, in terms of how it's going to fit in the long term, is going to be as good as you allow it to, given that you get the right size, because it will have that ability to mold to your feet. So yes, a Copa Gloro 2 can definitely keep up with the more expensive options, and as far as a value for money leather football boot is concerned, it's an excellent option. What is the best boot for players with flat feet? We tend to feel a lot of pressure and pain, especially where the arch is supposed to be, and we're trying to find something more comfortable and play better. I myself am also fairly flat-footed. However, I'm not overly sensitive to the inside part of the upper kind of grabbing my arch more aggressively. If it's legitimately just way too tight, yes, that's going to cause foot cramping and general discomfort. But depending on how flat your feet are and also how wide they are, that kind of grabbing of the upper on your arch can be super uncomfortable. So if that's something that you really struggle with, I would personally avoid most football boots with a one-piece upper construction, which I understand is the vast majority of football boots these days, but going for something A, with a leather upper. I just think it ends up being more forgiving, especially leather in the midfoot, allowing it to stretch a little bit. That's going to take away a lot of that pressure. And then B, something with a more traditional central lacing system, standalone tongue, and general U-throat design, where the upper can open up and expand as much as it needs to. That's really the reason why you want to avoid something with a one-piece upper, is even though it can stretch, it's still going to hold a decent amount of tension. And if it's the tightness that's causing you the discomfort, you need to get something that's not going to have tightness in that spot. Unfortunately though, even if you follow that advice, there's still a chance that you get a new pair of football boots and immediately don't love the way that they feel, where if your feet are legitimately that flat, you kind of just have to live with the fact that there's going to be a little bit of a break in time. There's going to be a period where you just need to get used to the way that they feel. And sometimes going through a couple sessions of foot cramping is what you need to do to adjust to a new pair. Where if your feet are on the extreme end of any part of the spectrum, super flat, really high arch, really narrow, really wide, it's going to be next to impossible to find a pair of football boots that's going to feel perfect out of the box.